What is going on, Factually Football listeners? It's Adam coming at you here this week. Going to talk a little bit about week one as we are all excited, or at least I'm excited for week one of the NFL season to finally get underway and the games to start to matter. And, the Colts started off with the divisional game this week. We've got a couple other games between Jacksonville and Washington. And obviously, the first game I want to talk about is the Colts game, but I think in fairness, we'll get to some of the others first. The game I want to talk about first is the Jacksonville-Washington game. Kind of an intriguing game. Obviously, we know that Carson Wentz is over there now in Washington. Wish him well. Again, I've said this many a times on the cast. Carson's a great guy. So I do wish him well over there. And he'll be throwing to Scary Terry and Curtis Samuel, obviously, out there. Really interesting game because, again, I think Jacksonville takes the next step this year, right? I think that they make the jump up. I think they've been on an upward trend, and some of the other teams are on a downward trend in the AFC South. So I really look for a tighter game. It probably not really high scoring. I think whatever team's defense steps up the most really wins here. When Washington has the ball, I think it's do the younger guys at Jacksonville step up? Caleb Anchiason, Josh Allen, some of those guys. You got Arden Key now over there. And then you've obviously got Devin Lloyd, Foyesade Aluakan, Shaquille Griffin. They've made some additions over there. The question that I always have is it enough? And at the end of the day, can Jacksonville find a good flow offensively? We've seen Trevor Lawrence. They're starting to try to surround him with some talent. I would have never paid that much for Christian Kirk, but again, I'm not an NFL executive, so it is kind of what it is, right? But you got Marvin Jones out there. You've got Christian Kirk. You've got Zay Jones as well, so it's the dynamic Jones brothers on the outside. But then they brought in, obviously, Evan Ingram at tight end, a guy who, in fairness, has underachieved in the last couple of years. Not just from a fantasy standpoint, as hopefully you all know I'm a big fantasy nerd, but, just overall performance just really hasn't been there. And then you've got a Washington defense that's without Chase Young. And the reality is that's a big ball player to miss. So Montez Sweat, Jonathan Allen, some of those guys, Deron Payne, they can be home wreckers. Jacksonville's invested a little bit of money. You've got Brandon Scherf there. You've got Barch that was drafted last year. You've obviously got Cam Robinson, which they gave some cash to. And then they're going to bring back Jawan Taylor on the outside there on the right side. So real curious to see what happens there with the rookie Luke Fortner in the middle. For my liking right now, you've got, as we said on Wednesday evening, you've got Washington getting 2.5, which is pretty normal. You get about 3 for being a home team there. Over under 44, again, I talked about how it's not going to be a high-scoring affair, in my opinion. Always can be wrong, especially early in the season. But, you're looking at an offense that was last year ranked 27th for Jacksonville and 22nd for Washington. So not exactly overly powering offenses. While they have gone out and spent some money, we'll see if it's enough. My thought here is that actually Jacksonville goes on the road, gets the win. I like their running game a little bit better. I think Antonio Gibson is good, but I think Travis Etienne finally gets to be cut loose here. The hope is obviously he stays healthy throughout the year because I'd love to see what a full year of him looks like, especially with no Urban Meyer there. So, again, good game. I really like the idea of Jacksonville going in to win that game, but not one that I'm going to be really glued to the television for, especially at that 1 o'clock game slot where the Colts play as well. So divisionally as well, the other game of the week at the 4 o'clock time slot is the Giants and Tennessee. I've been pretty hard on Tennessee all this offseason, all of these casts that you've seen or heard. And the reality is this is put up or shut up time. I don't think they're going to be as good as people think they're going to be. I think they go as Derrick Henry goes, which we all know. We saw what happened when Ryan Tannehill had to carry the bag last year, and they weren't as competitive, right? And then you top that off with losing A.J. Brown, losing Julio Jones, and you want me to believe that they're going to compete at the same level? I just don't see it. But flat out, if they can't do it here against the Giants, who quite honestly have been pretty terrible and underachieving for a while now, I don't know if they're ever going to do it. So, some matchups that I'm looking for here when it comes into this game. What does that offensive line do to the younger defensive line of the Giants? If they blow them off the ball and Derrick Henry doesn't get touched till he's 3 or 4 yards deep into the linebackers, or even in the secondary, I think Derrick Henry rolls, right? I think you're looking at 25 to 28 touches here. I think you're probably looking at 150 plus yards. Now, if that defense for the Giants can find a way to at least make some contact, either behind the line or at the line of scrimmage, I think Derrick Henry still probably gets 25 to 28 carries, but I think you're looking closer to the 100, 105. And then it's really a question of the offense, right? It's been a question for what seems like ever since Daniel Jones has been drafted there. Saquon Barkley really, in my opinion, wants to shut some people up this year. He's tired of all the razzing he's getting. He's tired of all the talk about how he's not going to perform. He just can't be what he was in college. And personally, again, speaking a little fantasy here, but I've got him on a lot of my fantasy teams. I think Saquon Barkley is poised for a huge year. But again, he only goes as far as that offensive line. They obviously invested in Evan Neal this year. That was a nice draft pick. You obviously have Andrew Thomas, which they invested in back in 2020. So you've got those guys. They also have the ex-Colt Mark Lewinsky at right guard. We wish Glow the best as well. And they've got some speed, right? You got Kadarius Toney, who traditionally runs in the slot, but then they drafted Wan'Dale Robinson. So look for, I don't want to call it trickery here, but look for an offense that's really focused on speed, quicker routes, getting the ball out of Daniel Jones's hands, as opposed to Jones trying to get the ball down the field, which is something they've tried in the past and just hasn't really been successful, right? If they can do that, or if they can get their guys in space a little bit, get them going in the passing game, I think that does nothing but helps Barkley in the run game. I do think, especially with the other game I talked about in this one, they're talking about some light rain here. I really think you're going to see a heavier dose of run from both games, right? I think you're going to see it obviously with Henry, no matter what the weather is, but when rain comes into play, I think you're going to see Derrick Henry. I also would look to see maybe some of that rookie Hassan Haskins to lighten that early load for Henry, depending on what the score looks like in the first half. But then, defensively, can Tennessee get better? They were ranked 25th last year in defense. Not exactly great. The 9th in offense, but I think they take a huge step back. I think they're no better than 15th overall in offense this year. And I think that defense, if they're lucky, may get to 20th. The Giants obviously have a ton of room to grow defensively. They were 30th last year and 18th on offense. So right now the line is trending a little bit up at 43.5 over under, with a 5.5 spread for Tennessee at home, which in fairness tells me that Vegas is thinking kind of the same thing I am. They're not really crazy sold on Tennessee. They don't feel like they've done enough in the offseason to get what they need to be that powerhouse. And slow down, Tennessee fans. I understand that they have Treylon Burks, right? I think he could be a good player. I actually really like Kyle Phillips. I think he could be a great player. But the reality is we don't know until they get out there and play in a real game. Robert Woods is obviously coming off the injury he had. I think he's going to be reliable. You obviously got Austin Hooper. And anytime you're in a run-heavy offense, a tight end becomes very important. We saw that with Jeff Swaim in the past there. We've seen that with Anthony Firkser, who's no longer with them. So again, I think there's some opportunity here. And I think if you're looking for a get right game early in the season for a team that needs to show something and not just stay stagnant this year, this Tennessee team should run all over the Giants. If they don't, just be ready, because I think a lot of people are going to be on the same wavelength as I am with them, which is just flat out not impressed. So here it is. I'm a Colts fan. It's no surprise. Colts background, Colts hat, Colts shirt, right? Big Colts fan, but I try to be objective, right? Colts go into Houston. Obviously big favorites. Right now they're a 7-point favorite in Houston. It's a 45.5 over under, which I think is probably a little low. I think that Houston finds some ways to score. Brandon Cooks traditionally kills the Colts. I don't know why, but Brandon Cooks seems to always do really well against the Colts. Houston obviously doesn't have – they've got a young running game. I shouldn't say they don't have a running game, but they've got a younger running game this year, right? And Dameon Pierce being that starter coming fresh out of college. And their line isn't crazy. Laramie Tunzel really hasn't, in fairness, been the same. You've got Titus Howard, the young guy starting at right tackle. You've got AJ Khan, who they brought over a few years back. None of them are bad, but none of them feel like a massive upgrade from what you would want to see on this type of offense, right? With that being said, I think this game looks like a heavy passing game. So it's going to be a heavy dose of Nico Collins, Brandon Cooks. The interesting part is what goes on at tight end. My opinion is you should see some Brevin Jordan, but there may be some injury concerns there. So we'll have to keep an eye on that going into the game. He's a big piece that they want to get going this year. At the end of the day, you've got a Colts defense that last year ranked 13th overall and an offense that ranked 14th. I would say with the additions of Gilmore and Ngakoue at the edge, and the drafting of Nick Cross, who is listed as a starter going into this game, I would say that defense got better. I think they can be a top 10. In fairness, I think they may be a top 5 if you look at turnovers this year. And I don't think that's a stretch because last year they were turnover machines. It's been something they've done for a long time. But I am intrigued to see what kind of pressure they get with Gus Bradley. Gus Bradley notoriously does not bring blitzes, but he still plays good defense. I mean, if you have any questions, look what he did with a mediocre defense in Vegas last year. Max Crosby had a great year. You had Yannick over there who had a great year. Jacksonville had given up on him. Boy, did they screw that one up. So, again, I think this Colts defense does get the best of Houston. It's a divisional game, so I do believe it'll be a little bit closer. I do find that the Colts should cover the 7. I'd feel a lot more comfortable at 6.5 just because I'm a weirdo like that. But, again, I'd take 6.5 and the over all day on 45.5. Because from the Colts offensive standpoint, I struggle to see where Houston stops them. You've got a young safety in Jalen Petre who played this hybrid, more nickel back at Baylor. You've got the rookie in Derek Stingley. On the other side, you've got Steven Nelson. So obviously he had a good year last year in Philly, but at linebacker, you've got Kamir Grugier-Hill, who, I used to work with a guy who played with him. You've got Kirksey, you've got Hewitt, but again, none of those names seem like they're game wreckers, right? You've got the old Colt Jerry Hughes on the outside. You've got Jonathan Greenard, who's a guy that was drafted in 2020. So that defense doesn't have any big studs. That sans any of the rookies doing more than most rookies do. And then from a Colts offensive standpoint, you've got a healthy Paris Campbell for the first time coming out of the preseason for the Colts since he's been a professional. So shout out Paris. I hope you stay healthy. Alec Pierce, the rookie who we had originally thought was going to stretch the field, And while most coaches don't show anything in the preseason, we did see Frank Reich getting him some looks on more outs, right? And some more slants, some more comeback style routes, which either A, is setting up defenses who may have relied too heavily on preseason film for the rookie Alec Pierce, or B, he's getting Pierce used to running routes that he didn't necessarily run at Cincinnati. Cincinnati was a vertical offense. Alec Pierce was quick. He is quick. And then you've got Michael Pittman on the other side of the ball. Pittman last year ran a ton of drags, a ton of slants. He was your guy across the middle. I do look for them to come up with some packages to get him a little more vertical this year and use his height, especially when he's playing against smaller cornerbacks. But then, this year for the Colts, Mo Alley-Cox is the go-to tight end, right? It's Mo Alley, it's Kylen Granson, the rookie Jelani Woods, which I don't know how much we'll see, especially in this first game. But Mo Alley got invited to tight end U this year, right? Which is George Kittle's big event that he brings. I think it's like 40 or 50 tight ends in. Some college kids, some professionals. But to get invited to that, that's not something that you've seen a Colts tight end invited to in a while, right? So congrats to him on that one. And then in the backfield, it's pretty simple. It's Jonathan Taylor, with some sprinkling of Nyheim Hines. Hines will get more looks this year. Matt Ryan has an ability to check down. And that's not a shot at Carson. It's just a shot at what happened last year. The fact is they didn't have enough check down to the running back plays last year, whether it was by design or by breakdown. And that's going to change this year. It's something that had been talked about by Ballard. It's something that's been talked about by Reich. So at the end of the day, I think the Colts offense in this one really asserts their will. We're going to get a look at Matt Pryor at left tackle. We've obviously got Danny Pinner starting at right guard. So we've got two new starters in there. But at the end of the day, you need guys to get in there and do their job. And I think those guys will, because Braden Smith, Ryan Kelly, and Quentin Nelson are just flat out all pro caliber. You can call me a homer all you want, but just look at the stats. The guys have perennially been there. They continue to do the work, and they have a burning desire internally to get the job done and not care about being talked about. If you ever think differently, I ask you to go out there and read some of the things that you'll hear about the Quentin Nelsons and the Ryan Kellys of the world, right? Just guys that go to work, flat out get the job done. So I expect them to get the job done against a pretty subpar Houston team here. One thing of note, and I've been talking to a few people about this, I talked about Campbell being healthy for the first time coming out of preseason as a pro for the Colt, quite honestly. I look for him to have a big game, and I'll tell you why. T.Y. Hilton torches the Houston Texans. And the one thing that we know about the Colts with T.Y. Hilton is they flat out got him vertical. They'd run post, they'd run go routes, but they got T.Y. loose. They put the pressure on the safeties. Remember, I talked about a rookie safety back there and a rookie cornerback. So look for the Colts to exploit some of those matchups. And heaven forbid Stingley and Petrie are on the same side. You're going to see some athletic plays from the young defenders, but I think Campbell gets loose in this game. I think you're looking at a 4 or 5 catch, 120-plus yard and a touchdown style game. I think he comes out and makes a statement when everybody else is talking about Michael Pittman and his reliability and Jonathan Taylor and his more than likely 25-plus carries he's going to get, and Alec Pierce and how fast he is. I think Paris comes out and says, look at me. I'm the guy you drafted. I got this. I've got my health in order. We're ready to roll. So, again, I think the Colts, for lack of a better term, roll here. It's an early game in the season, so I don't look for it to be a overly polished victory, other than the fact that they should be in control from start to finish. I think that they're going to lay the wood early. I think that they're going to get some pressure on Davis Mills, who, by the way, played really well last year. I was impressed with Davis Mills for a guy coming into an organization that just flat out was not great last year. Mills was, what did he start? He started 11 games. He was 2-9, so I think you got to throw that out. I mean, because we know the team wasn't good. But I mean, the kid threw 16 touchdowns, 10 picks. Again, nothing over the top from the statistical standpoint, but he looks the part. He's a bigger guy. He's younger. They've at least made a decision for this year to kind of build around him or at least roll with him. And I think that's probably the best you can do with what you currently have in Houston. They just had so many holes to plug. I love that they went out and got Evan Neal. But I think this could be a higher scoring game than 45.5, which is what it's currently at tonight. I could see the Colts maybe like 31-17, 31-21, even maybe 31-24, right? Houston makes a late comeback. The Colts go into a soft defense. I don't want to see that. It's something we believe we're getting rid of with Eberflus going to Chicago. But hey, you never know. That's why they play the games. I'm super excited as I sit here on Wednesday night for NFL football to finally kick off. So thanks for stopping by. Thanks for listening all. Check out our different podcast pages. Buzzsprout is where a lot of it is, but you can also hunt us down on Spotify, on Apple, or on iTunes, pretty much anywhere you can get your podcast. You can hunt us down. Just look under Factually Football, hit the subscribe button. You get notified when we put out new weekly content, and that's our goal, is to put out weekly content. Didn't have Andrew and Cody with me this week. They were getting busy. Andrew obviously writes for Stampede Blue, and Cody's got that great podcast called Bringing the Juice with Derek Felger. So reality is our goal is to bring you the content, bring you the stats. So thanks for stopping by, guys. Have a great evening.